Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Voices for Excellence. I am your host, Dr. Michael Connor, CEO and founder of the Agile Evolutionary Group and also co-founder of AEG Systems. And today's guest is a dear friend of mine. We have known each other for, I would say, at least wow, we're getting old, going on 5 years now, right? Going on 5 years. And I remember 5 years ago when I attended my first CALSA Summer Institute, and Dr. Gutierrez was there. We got in a great conversation, and then we just started to extend that. And then as it started to extend, year one became year two became year three, and here we are when year five, still going at it. Dr. Gutierrez invited me to the Coachella Valley. It's the affiliate of
CALSA chapter. It was the CALSA Coachella Valley chapter.
you were former president, right? Or still are
I
president?
founded it. I founded the chapter, and then I was, of course, the president, and then I've been supporting it for the past.
Founding member to president to now and a supporting role, but again brought me out there to unpack the 22nd century education model. We've actually started talking about having Dr. Gutierrez on Voices for Excellence season 2. So
Oh,
now
really?
3 years, we're in season 4 now, about to be in season 5 in September. So Antoinette, it's been 3 years in the making. So she just released her book. I served in a variety of different roles at the central level, very successful principal when she was there, doing her own work now, and then just released her book. Of course, I just stated that we're going to be unpacking today. So it is my absolute honor to have my dear friend, colleague that I speak to frequently, see each other frequently when I'm out in California. I'll be out in California 2 times in August. So hopefully we can get together, Dr. Gutierrez. And then, her book just started to actually dive into it. Feel offended because she hasn't given me a signed copy yet. But
I have to mail it. Well, next time you come out, I'll physically hand it to you. I'm not good with the mail. I have to go places for that, and that takes work. So I gotta physically see.
oh man, as you can see, our relationship is so good. It is an honor to absolutely have Dr. Antoinette Gutierrez on Voices for Excellence. Dr. G, heartfelt welcome. How are you? It's early over there now.
It is, and my day just started. It's 8:07 AM, and
Well,
it's already hot.
yeah, I can actually say this. It's hot here in
Is it
Rochester.
hot over there too?
But that's infrequent. I mean, that doesn't happen. But so glad to have you on Voices for Excellence, Antoinette. Can't wait to see you again in person.
Yeah.
So, Antoinette, I'm going to ask you a series of questions now. I'm going to be laughing because some of the questions, the first question, just specifically, this is where now my audience and me actually get to know a little bit of who you are. I know who you are, but I really want to see where you're going to take this. So, your work as an educational leader, consultant, and author is extensive in California, up and down, numerous awards that you have received in California, numerous awards you have received with CALSA. But for leaders that are being introduced to Dr. Antoinette Gutierrez for the first time on Voices for Excellence, what song describes your leadership signature in the field?
And I was telling you before we started recording thank you for sending this to me in advance so I could think about this one. I would say Where is the Love by Black Eyed Peas. I think that epitomizes everything that I believe and I stand for and the courage that it takes to make a difference through love, which we're going to talk about later.
Foundational, right? Because around love. And it resonates with me because it's not discussed in
It's
education.
not, and it really should be since we're in the field of humans and developing humans, but it's very taboo and it really shouldn't be because we have to really love the people that we serve so that the people we serve can love on the kids and so that we are doing right by society as a whole.
Yeah. And so that's resonating again because you're right, right? When we think about education, when we think about how we're serving our constituents, our most important customers, i.e., families and students, our stakeholders, are we truly defining what love looks like? And then, I really want to now go kind of into your book right? And congratulations again. To my audience, the name of the book is Healing for Leadership: How Emotionally Intelligent Leaders Build Safe, Resilient Teams. Now, I want to add that emergent theme from your response to the first question, love, right? Healing, love, being emotionally intelligent and aware leaders. But I want you to unpack this because this was another, resonating point from your book. A healing leader, right? I've never heard it in that context, to be an intentional healing leader. Now, from your book, for level setting purposes, what does the word healing mean in the context of leadership for someone like me or my audience who has never heard this frame together?
So I'm going to add a little bit of context on how that came to be so that you can understand why it's titled Healing Leader. So, because I've been in a variety of different settings, I've had a multitude of different leaders that I've worked for, and some have been phenomenal that I've wanted to emulate, and then others have been not so awesome and not so amazing, and so they've really been damaging. And it's unfortunately we're in a field where people who literally even have not taken care of their own internal triggers or haven't understood how to interact with others from a place of love and really, really care about where people are developmentally, are in these positions of high level leadership and they're literally damaging people. So that's one piece of it. And then on the side note, and then on a separate note, you also have the emerging themes of trauma informed teaching, creating a safe environment in the classroom. We're talking about SEL, we're talking about PBIS, we're talking about all these things that we want adults to provide for students, right? And we talk about that. We want them to be safe and we want them to feel included and we want them to be culturally proficient teachers and all of this. But what the gap in the literature was really saying was it has to start from the top. And so we start a lot of things from the classroom, but we don't necessarily start from teaching leaders how to model and emulate what we want the teachers to be able to do. And so there's this weird expectation, but not there's an expectation for teachers, but not an expectation for ourselves as leaders to lead the work and to do the hard internal work. So all of that to say, healing leader is someone who has done a lot of their internal work. This is a lot of pre-work. So anytime you read books on leadership, it's the strategies, it's things you have to do. This is the work that you have to do internally before you can do any of those things. So for example, when you're supposed to create safe spaces, allow different voices. If you have not done the internal work on what your biases are, on who you are, how you respond to things that rub you the wrong way, how people come at you. If you haven't done all that work, you're going to be triggered. So you're going to respond, you're going to trigger the next person, and you're not going to be as effective as a leader as somebody who's done the inner work. So the healing leader is someone who has taken care of themselves and worked through a lot of their internal stuff so that then they now can hold a space for other people while they're processing their own journey. And so that comes in the place of some of the trauma that we experience from a day-to-day in the job. Also, some communities are more trauma I'm thinking of the word, so I'm pausing. If we could some other communities have a lot more secondary trauma that we experience through the students in the community, and so we have to be able to, as leaders, hold space for people that are going through that, so they can also hold space for students. So that's how I would define the healing leader.
Unbelievable. Now, I want to extend on that because there's some sub themes that came from that. Dr. Gutierrez is leadership vulnerability, right? And to be that level, to have that level of vulnerability, exhibiting that to your staff, to your community, that's taking risk, right? But even before we go, even before vulnerability, I want to say, and this is what my question is based off this sub theme and internal work, right? How do we get leaders, or if I'm a leader, I chief academic officer, superintendent, CEO, executive director of a charter network, anything, nonprofit, a tech company, leadership is leadership, right?
Correct. Even outside of education. Mhm.
How do we get our leaders and staff to be that vulnerable to do that internal work, which will correlate to better cultural dimensions, interactions, intentionality around engagement with students, can our parents, families, how do we now collectively do that work as a staff or a learning organization?
So there is a tool in the book so that you could do like a self-assessment, but I would say the easiest answer and the most obvious is model it. So if you're the top level leader, you have to be able to model it. So you cannot expect anyone to do it if you can't do it. So you have to sit with yourself and say, look, this, I'm not good with XYZ. And a lot of this came up between two different pieces of my background. One, my dissertation was on emotional intelligence. So obviously that's my research base of knowledge. But then on top of that, the other piece was I've done a lot of equity work. And so and because I've spoken to a lot of my white folks, right? You have the how you present the topics about evaluating your own biases and things like that are are going to be very is going to be a determining factor for how people receive the message and how honest and vulnerable they're going to be in their own reflection. Okay? So some of this work actually came out of some of the equity work, but without using the word equity, how do we frame it? And this is part of the frame. How do we frame it so that we're evaluating our own biases? And it doesn't have to be around race. It can be around ableism. It can be around how our colleagues work. It can be around personality traits. It can be around all kinds of things. But essentially, it's creating that gap between something happening and then our response to it, and elongating that gap as long as we can. So those are those things that also have added into the conversation. So to be able to create a safe space for leaders to be able to do this work, you have to model it, and it is very vulnerable, but it also is very honest, and it's people will judge it, especially when they're uncomfortable, and especially if you're in an environment that that has never been the case, so you have to maybe slowly ease into it. Like, maybe not go all out, but start with the smaller things. And some things that are a little bit safer, and then you can get a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and Dr. Gutierrez, I thank you for saying that because, when we start to think about when we evaluate our own biases, automatically people go to it's about race, right? Well, about in schools. But if you think about it, we all have biases that we need to be able to acknowledge. And if we think about unpacking our specific biases, specifically when it comes to an educational context, right? And I'm thinking about biases, with I'm not a good teacher in ELA. That could be an internal bias that could actually impact instruction, or I'm not, I love my students that love math because I love math. And so that's a bias that we have to be able to unpack with that and have that candid and honest internal reflection is needed. And then also, I really appreciate how you said modeling the behavior, right? When we model the expectation and truly get authentic with understanding who we are from an educational context, I think that now we can be very intentional, as
But
you stated.
also allow people to be able to be honest in their reflections and support that. So whether you believe in it or not, again, you have to be healed enough to be able to say to allow people to say things that maybe you're just like, "That doesn't feel good," but they're grappling with it, so you have to allow that so that they can take their own journey. And that's why you have to do it yourself before you can hold space for leaders to do it, before you can hold space for teachers to do it.
Yeah, yeah, understanding what triggered you, right? And if we unpack that, unpacking what our triggers are specifically in the context of student behavior and how students respond,
Or
I think
adult behavior.
adult behavior as well.
How did
And
they tell you they disagree with something? How do they do we do like, "Oh, that teacher's difficult." Like, how many times do we say things like that, right? We label people based on their behavior, based on what we don't feel is in alignment with what we think should be how people think. We label people based on how we think they should behave, as opposed to acknowledging this is where they are, how do we understand them so we can help better serve them?
absolutely. I want to extend on that, right? Because I think one of the misnomers is that if we really underpin this work within our practices, within the culture, then accountability is mitigated, right? But, extending from themes of your book, right? How should we, or how leaders, if they're doing this work, how should leaders balance accountability and compassion, right? And then when I think about it, there's that phrase of accountability and compassion, but there's the element of psychological safety, right? How do we embed that in our culture without it being mistaken for low expectations?
So I would say love, those 2 things go hand in hand. And I'm gonna equate it to being a parent. So we love our kids so much that we know they can be better people, and so we hold them accountable to what we know they can do. And I would s and we don't lower our expectations because they're our own kid or because we love them or we have compassion. We actually have higher expectations, but we love them through it, and because we trust that they can be better people, that's how we behave. So I would equate that to not saying, your teachers are your children, but I would say if you truly love your team, if you truly care about them and you truly care that they become the best people in their profession as possible, which is a lot of times our job as leaders, then you have to be have crucial conversations. You have to hold them accountable. Another thing that we talk a lot about in, leadership is clarity is kindness, right? So the clearer you are with the expectation and providing those high level supports to get there, and people will get to where you want them to go if you believe that that's where they can go. And you can believe where people can go if you truly love them and see that in them. So that's where I don't think there's a separation. I think there's to love people really is to hold people to high expectations. And I think it's a disservice if you really care about someone to not address things.
Yeah. Can you, Dr. G, because I love the fact that, you use the example of how you love your own children and you have high expectations for them, right? Absolutely. In this specific context, I just want you to unpack the phrase high expectation that is undergirded with your themes from your book. What does that look like specifically around this focus on love?
Well, the high expectations I'm talking about is in a professional setting. So, for example, I would have high expectations that a teacher in a classroom does everything they can that's within their power to provide the optimal instructional learning environment, right? Now, so it's not the expectation of healing and it's not the expectation of being a certain way. It's I'm going to use the tool of loving and provide and being a healing leader to allow them to work through whatever they need to work through to get to where they need to be professionally. So that's what I want to differentiate. And same thing. So if I'm a leader of leaders, I want the leaders to be able to provide as much structure and support and clarity of their teachers so that their teachers perform at their maximum level. Right? So that's and then of course it can keep going up and all the way down throughout the organization. But essentially, the expectations are that work ability to get the outcomes that we're expecting them to get. And that's through love, that's through acceptance, that's through psychological safety, but that's not the expectation is that's a vehicle, less the outcome.
Yeah, I love what you said, Antoinette. Structure, support, and clarity. I want to continue that element with around students, right? Generation Alpha and Generation Beta. Generation Alpha, 2000, born 2010, 2000, between 2010 2025, first AI natives, technology integration since they were born. Generation Beta, 2025 to 2040, where they're pretty much going to define what the economy is going to be within the 22nd century. But what we know about Generation Alpha and Generation Beta, Dr. G, is that they are the most volatile generations in the context of mental health. So when I think about this AC 2035 economy, how should now instructional design, how should culture embed emotional safety that is grounded in what we use historically in education, the word rare?
So I'm gonna start with a book recommendation because this gave me a lot of foundation for this generation and what we might need to do to move forward. There's a book called The Anxious Generation. I don't know if you've read it, but essentially it's the shifts in about 2015 that really changed our learning and development as the students that are coming up or the children that are coming up and changing because everything that they're experiencing went from went from very social interactions and learning how to interact appropriately with people, not necessarily screens. It wasn't even screens, it wasn't TV. It was when social media became a pivotal component of what social interaction and acceptance looked like. And then also compounded with parents that did not allow that social interaction, that unstructured time, that unsupervised time where you start learning, social interactions on your own. So now we have, and this is one of the reasons why we have so many students that don't know how to interact with the world in a safe way because they've never been exposed to it. So then, of course, that anxiety gets compounded because they're even less and less. So then they're more and more withdrawn because they haven't had the physical interaction with humans, with other humans, to the degree that say you and I did. And then on top of that, what is modeled as the likes or popular behavior is not something that's transferable into real life, which is that, social media likes and dislikes. So the people that are popular in the likes and dislikes are extremely ridiculous, right? The ones that get the most attention, but they're not necessarily the most normal things that can translate to bringing into classroom or a store or workplace. So those that really frames my answer for you because I really do believe AI is definitely of an integrated part of who we are going to be, but I feel like we have to start first with creating that structure where kids get a chance to interact in the real world first so that they can emulate it in the virtual world. That way there's some grounded components and that we're still guiding AI as opposed to AI guiding us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And as a sub question to this, right? Because I think that it is fundamentally important, and I love how you brought in artificial intelligence because we know Generation Alpha, Generation Beta's Dr. G's technology. When we think about this as we advance, is going to be around ASI and agentic AI. Not even what we're focusing on now, but what do you think are the biggest risk factors in education that evolves around technology and AI, and how do we move towards exactly what you're talking about?
I think it's fear. I think it's fear. I think so. I think there's a few things. I think there's fear, and then there's also a lack of understanding. And also, our educational system does not move very quickly, right? So, as an entity, we do not move to the speed of industry. And because my current role, all we work is in career tech ed, I am very aware of the fact that we have to meet with industry constantly to calibrate where we're getting kids and leaving kids in the school system and making sure they're ready for the workplace, right? So AI is a component of it. So we can't just keep doing all the coding for example, for our video game design, when now a lot of people can write in code. We'll have to still be able to edit it as of right now. But at the same token, instead of hand writing a bunch of code, you could literally use AI to write a code and then now modify it, right? To create a video game. So that's just one example of how we need to align. But what we do is specifically CTE. So when you talk about a K-12 system, we don't move quickly. We're also bound by so many of the bureaucratic restraints such as, student safety, data safety, so we can use AI, but then there's also like, okay, but how much can we put in that's gonna that's gonna be taken and then owned by some company, and these are minors. So there's that cautious piece, and it takes us a while in education to work through those things. And then by the time we work through those things, technology has long passed us. So I think that's some of the issues we face in education with technology.
Yeah, yeah. And then, Antoinette, great points. Because when I think about this now, right, and Generation Alpha, Generation Beta, most volatile generations of any kind. Also, when we think about, Generation Alpha, Generation Beta, increased percentages, and this is factual based off of the data, increased percentages of mental health and emotional support, right? So,
There's
and
a deep connection.
yeah, and
Deep
that and
connection.
you know what? And I think that, there's that trade-off, right? Obviously, when, we see you and I, when we were growing up, our parents would throw us out the house,
100%.
and
Don't come back till the nighttime or the lights come on. Yeah.
that's exactly what my mother used to say. Don't come back. And she was like, and then there was no cell phone access. So they'll drive around the car looking for you. But it was, I think about how we were growing up versus this generation, Generation Alpha, where a lot of their interactions are online, right? We have to, as parents, and what we did, we had to be intentional now we have to be intentional to set play dates so that there is that social interaction and the social dynamics of it. Even, with my son, we get in some, pretty heated discussions regarding you're not bringing the iPad to the dinner table. We're talking, right? We're gonna when we're going outside. What do we? Because I'm trying to be cognizant with limiting. I should say. I wouldn't even say limiting, but finding.
You're intentionally structuring time for them to not be on social media, and it's not even screen time, it's social media. So if you the book that I mentioned has a lot of research in it, and it's not high school beyond, right? It's the foundational years. So if we're able to limit and encourage unsupervised. And this is where, as parents, we have kind of done the pendulum swing from our parents. They left us all unattended. So now we're constantly watching them, right? We're like, well, yeah, there's murderers everywhere, right? So that's where we grew up. So, it was a scary place. And so now we're like, how would we let our kids out? But now we don't let our kids walk to the get the mail. We never let them out of our sight. And so that also is prohibiting them from their growth, their natural growth. So if we can focus more on those essential, interactions, and then as they get older, now they're in that, AI technology world because that's what they're going to need when now they have a balance.
Great point, because when we think about it, artificial intelligence, disruptive and emergent technologies is going to be standardized within every single lever of the economy and industries by 2035. Last question, Dr. G. You made it. Even though it's 3 years late, we did it. But Dr. G, I'm only going to limit you to 3 words. Now, I've known you for 5 years. I've never ever seen you be limited to 3 words. Actually, 3,000 times, whatever, equating to 3 million. But 3 words, good sis. What 3 words do you want our audience today to leave with regarding leadership strategies for resilience in the 26-27 academic year?
All right. I'm gonna go with love, courage, and persistence.
Oh, wow, you're going to be a rule follower.
Who said I'm a rule follower? I know. But look, because I figured you'd cut me off anyways. So if I said more than one word, then or three, then follow you'd be like, all right, pick three and give her three. So I don't want you to pick the three. So you see how that works? I know. I'm on position to fight as well.
This is to my audience. This is the love, and this is the love that Dr. G shows to me. But I want you to answer that, please. Love, courage, and persistence. Expand on that.
So love, obviously, I think that should be the center of everything we do. If we really care about people, regardless of, beliefs and personalities and where they come from, we really have to hold space for people and accept people different from us. If we could do that, oh my gosh, the world would be such an amazing place. So that's the first thing. Courage, because doing something different than what everybody does takes a lot of courage. To stand up and be vulnerable takes courage to be able to say I love you, which I did do with my staff because we got to that place, right? I would never cold start with I love you guys, but eventually we got to that place like I love you as human beings, right? Nothing inappropriate as a human being. I love you and I care about you. That takes courage. To be able to do right by people takes courage, especially if it's not what the hive thinking is accepting. And then persistence is just don't give up. In our environment and in education, there are so many reasons to be stopped, to give up, to get out of the field, to to get tired of the struggle, to do the right thing. And so just don't. And that's hard. And sometimes I tell that to myself, but just to keep going because to make that difference for people.
Absolutely. Love, courage, and persistence.
Mhm.
Dr. Antoinette Gutierrez, thank you for coming on Voices for Excellence. I can actually say, knowing you for 5 years, good sister, I love you to death. You know, I call you up. You are the homie. I always, to my audience, I always call Antoinette the homie. So she know that, for a long time. But thank you, Dr. G. If my audience want to continue this conversation, unpack specific themes from your book, or even just want to have a high level cursory overview or summary of your book and kind of leading that with leaders around being a healing leader, emotionally intelligent and aware of the internal work that they have to do, how would they be able to contact you?
Well, they can reach me on LinkedIn. It's just Dr. Antoinette Gutierrez. Nice is my name. I can also be reached via Instagram. And again, just search my name and I pop up on those two. And if they want to email me, I can give you my email address. It's Annie, ANNIE dash Julio at hotmail.com. I have an old school one. I've never let it go. So yes, I understand there's judgment and I'm not to the current age, but it works and I still get emails. So until I don't get emails, I'm gonna keep it. You can email me. Don't be judging my Hotmail. It's not Yahoo, so
Hotmail, yes, man, I love it, Doctor.
but I do and I am open anytime. I love conversations if people have questions. The book itself also is its own reflection. So it has questions at the end of each chapter. So if people want to take that journey, there's questions to prompt them on their own thinking. So if they're taking it seriously, they're really doing the work. There's a lot to wade through. There's opportunities to reflect throughout the book.
Absolutely. And to my audience, please remember to get Dr. G's book, Healing for Leadership: How Emotionally Intelligent Leaders Build Safe, Resilient Teams. Dr. G, thank you so much. I'll probably wind up talking to you next week, the week after. We always stay.
Yes, call me so we can
De-
catch up. Yeah.
Definitely will. Dr. G, thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Connor.
On that note, onward and upward, everybody. Have a great evening.